And we're back. I'm your host, BKP. Good morning from the office, North Georgia's only live online morning show. And I'm joined to round out the show this morning with Gilmer County Sheriff Stacy Nicholson. Sheriff, how are you this morning?
I'm doing good, Brian. How about you?
Good. You know, I've seen some outpouring over the internet of just after what took place in Dallas, just nationally, it looked like nationally people stepping up and saying thank you to local law enforcement all over the place. What's that been like around the sheriff's office?
Oh, it's no different than everywhere else across the United States. We've on Friday we had I don't know how many different deliveries of food, fruit trays, cookies, cakes, all kinds of stuff. The most interesting thing was one of my deputies came to me on Friday afternoon and said he was driving down the road and a woman flagged him down in her car, and he thought, he stopped. She needed help. So he stopped and said she had tears coming down her eyes, so he thought she was in some kind of distress and said she just broke down and said she was sorry about how her, and I think she meant people as a whole, sometimes treat law enforcement. And she was so touched by what had went on in Dallas that she was sincerely tore up about it. And of course the deputy, thanked her, and she said, I just wanted to let you know I appreciate you, what you do. And he'd never met the woman before in his life. And constantly over the last few days, I don't know how many times I personally have ran into people that just said simply, thank you for what you do. What happened in Dallas was an extreme tragedy. But overall, across the United States, certainly here in Gilmer County, the citizens appreciate what law enforcement do. I truly and firmly believe that the citizens as a whole are behind, and I don't care what color they are, where they came from, what their background is, as a whole, as a general, in general, I believe citizens appreciate law enforcement, fire, EMS, public safety.
But let me ask you some questions, and you stay in contact and you know what's going on through the state and national sheriff's association, and we don't experience it here, but what do you think some of the tension is with police officers in some of these inner cities and the high crime neighborhoods?
Well, I can't speak firsthand of where the tension builds. I think a lot of it stems from the fact that people can have their fire fueled,
right,
if the right fuel is available, and that's what we've seen in the last year or two, is the fires have been fueled, and they've been fueled by irresponsible high-level politicians. They've been fueled by irresponsible media broadcast, creating divide where there is not as much of a divide. And I'm gonna probably shock you when I say this. We in law enforcement, we have a role and responsibility as well in this. I think it's just like every situation you could talk about. I truly believe that 99% of the law enforcement officers in this county, in this region, the state, in the United States, do good. They intend to do good, and they do good. They do their jobs right. They do their jobs according to the Constitution. There are, I'm certain, that 1% out there that lends to creating some issues. But when you take something where someone has, one of the cases where someone has died at the hands of law enforcement, whether it be justified or not, and in many of the cases that's been in the national media in the last few years, they have been justified. It wasn't wanted, it wasn't intended, it happened, and things in law enforcement world happen like that many times. But nevertheless, that was a fire that was lit, and then people throw fuel on it, and that's, I think that's where we're at right now.
Let me ask you another question. I agree with irresponsible chains of events that have led to divide. My first guest, Gabe Northern, said, you know, you do something really good in the community, bring people together, and it gets 30 seconds at the end of the newscast, but if somebody gets killed, let me ask you this: as far as law enforcement, recently we continue to hear retraining. They need retraining. They need retraining. It just seems like there's a couple lines, even to the point where national codes, national training. What do you say on that? I mean, that's what I just keep hearing, is national codes, trainings, and disciplines for law enforcement.
Well, I don't think I don't like the idea of national anything. I just don't, because what works in Buffalo, New York, what works in Dallas, Texas, what works in Orlando, Florida, might not work in Gilmer County, and vice versa. But I think that it is as a law enforcement administrator, I think that we are very much so, more so than ever. We better be on on the job of making sure that our officers that work for us, I don't know about retraining. I think back to the training that I've had over the years, which is very similar to the training my officers have had. In some areas, maybe less than some of my officers have had. I don't think we need retraining. I think we need to hold it. We need to hold our each other's feet to the fire, and making sure that we follow the Constitution. If we follow the Constitution in doing our jobs, and the case law that has come out over the years based on cases that have been fought that refers back to the Constitution, if we follow those, I don't think, racial profiling is non-existent if you're following the Constitution. If someone's breaking the law, here's where I have a problem with some of the things I've heard with some of the protesters being interviewed, or demonstrators. I don't want to say protesters, demonstrators being interviewed. Is it really doesn't matter who's driving that car. It doesn't matter if they're male, female, black, white, brown, green, purple. It doesn't matter. As long as you're following the Constitution, you have a reason they have broken the law, and you have probable cause to believe they have broken the law, there shouldn't be an issue with a traffic stop. It shouldn't be considered racial profiling. Do those things happen? I'm certain they do. We're not a very diverse community. So I'm not probably the most learned individual to be speaking about racial issues.
Well, the thing is though, I mean, we had here, let's go back just a year, three black males, a black female, I think it was, went into Dollar General in Fannin County, guns a-blazing, you want to say it that way. They were firing shots. Next thing you know, they're crossing the county line, flying down the road. They come across the bridge flying, so they're traffic stop. Next thing you know, they got a gun out and they're shooting, or there's a chase and everything right here in Gilmer County. Now, if that went, let's say if that ended the wrong way, the beginning of that of the Dollar General and them firing all these shots, and it went the wrong way, and one of them had been killed, it could have led the news that black man killed in North Georgia in a predominantly white area or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So I do think that's where irresponsible media. I look at the arrest records every week. You guys, along with you in the city of LJ and East LJ, you arrest, sad to say, you arrest people all week long. And it's drugs and DUI and one thing after another. It's just they are predominantly white or Latino in this area. And so, but nobody's making an outcry because you're arresting people.
That's right.
So I do think sometimes irresponsible media.
Let me give you a real quick example, and I'm not going to call, and nor will I answer the questions if you have them about this, because I know who the agency is, I know who the deputy is, and I know who the news media outlet was that made this call, but. I'll say in the last 3 years, there was a deputy in North Georgia that answered a call. It was a white male. I don't remember I believe it was some sort of something. He had a gun, and he was, bottom line, deputy was fully justified. It was found to be fully justified. The deputy shot and killed the individual. Within a few minutes, a news media outlet was on the phone with the sheriff. And the sheriff he said he really dreaded the flurry that was about to come to his county. They asked him what was the race of the individual. He said white. They said, well, we probably won't come up. And he said, okay, well, that's good. By the way, he had a gun, too. They didn't care if he had a gun or not. They wanted to know what race he was.
That was the first question.
That was the only question. That was the only question, and they did not come. They did not come and do us, which everybody's, the sheriff was glad of that. It's a bad thing. Nobody, I as a sheriff, don't want my deputies to have to use deadly force. I want them to if they have to, but I don't want them to. I don't want them to for how it will affect them mentally, as well as what it's going to do to my schedule for the next week or 2 weeks. That's just I'm just being honest. Nobody wants their deputies or police officers, to have to use deadly force.
White, black, no matter who you stop, what is the training for your deputies when they walk up to the car? What should I have ready when I'm pulled over? How should I react to being pulled over? What is the best way that the deputy would perceive that I'm compliant? And
what I tell folks, and this same question comes up all the time from folks who are coming to get a gun permit. And they say, hey, by the way, as they got their gun permit and they're walking out of the courthouse, by the way, if I get pulled over and I got the gun, what should I do? What I tell folks is, leave your hands on the steering wheel. Don't be scrounging around looking for your license and insurance and all this other stuff. Or don't be trying to hide your cell phone because you've been texting on it and you're afraid you're trying to get it cut on vibrate so they won't hear the ding ding ding. Just leave your hands on the steering wheel and just answer the questions that's asked of you. And they're going to ask you for your license, or they're going to tell you. They should be telling you who they are, why they pulled you over, and if they need to check your license, they may ask you for your license. And that's just a normal routine stop.
Should you identify? Should you identify that you have a carry permit and a weapons in the vehicle?
I would only bring that up if the gun is near you and they can see it. Or B, if the officer asks you for something that you're going to have to go digging around for, and you know that where you're going to be digging for your license, you've also got your 9mm, stashed away, then let them know. We have had a changeover. We've had a changeover, kind of in how we think. Since the gun laws and the carry,
Right.
all that stuff. Since
Open
that,
carry.
over the last couple of 3 years, we've had to really change the way we think around here. Now I don't know how folks are in other places, but around here, it used to be very, very seldom that you would see anyone with a handgun, sidearm. Now you go to Walmart and you'll see 15 people walking around Walmart with a gun on, exposed. So my deputies are kind of expecting most folks to have a gun. They don't care as long as as long as you're acting right. As long as you're acting right, they don't care if you got a gun because you probably got a legal reason to have a gun. But as long as you're acting right, there's no problem.
Here's a question that I know we'd like to have an answer to, because regardless if you are in racial areas of racial tension, you're in an inner city, in one of the somewhere in the country, regardless of where you're at, you're dealing with these every day. You're dealing with immediately deputy pulls somebody over and somebody thinks, I'm recording this, or I'm putting it up in case you say something you shouldn't. What kind of training, what are you discussing with your men and women in the sheriff's office? What are you getting as training? How do you feel about, you walked up to, I see the lights on, I say, you know what, you're gonna, how do you feel about this age we're living in?
Well, it definitely, it's a game changer. What I mean by that is this: the deputies the officers, all the police officers, deputy sheriffs, they have to understand, and that's what we tell our folks. Everything you do, you need to understand. You very well may be being recorded. Everything you say, everything you do out there on that street, you very well may be being recorded. And so it shouldn't be a game changer if you're doing your job right. And now, everybody has their own personalities. Everybody has their own way of speaking to someone. But if you're doing your job right, the right way, you're not abusing your power, what does it matter if nobody likes it? It's aggravating, but what does it matter? Shouldn't matter.
Well, one of the things is we, I've heard people say that people turn them on and they catch the last minute of what took place and not the first minute.
That's right.
And so on and so forth. And there are some talk about, you know, not being able to video police officers, sheriffs, deputies, or whatever. And I just wondered in your office and some of the things that you're hearing and some of the training, these things are changing things.
Hmm. Well, well, they are. I mean, but you mentioned that and you touched on that, and that's an excellent point, and it's inevitable that that's what happens. They see what the citizen or the passerby that comes by 2 minutes or a minute in, or it might be 30 seconds. I mean, things happen in the blink of an eye in a deadly force issue. But let's not even talk about deadly force. Let's just talk about a struggle that goes on for a little while. And that's been the subject of some of the national cases, and ultimately there was a death. But the passerby may catch where the person's on the ground handcuffed, and there's 2 or 3 people, officers on the person. You know, we got a leg here and a leg there and an arm and a shoulder down and all this stuff. But it didn't catch what happened to cause that violent incident. And lo and behold, that's what you see broadcast over every news channel that you turn on TV for the next 5 days, is the end of something that started out very violent and was able, you know, and sometimes the end results are not how we want them to end, but sometimes bad things happen and they're unintended. But if the officer is using a legally justified amount of force, and something bad happens, it's not that officer's fault. It's the person that caused that to happen's fault. That's the point that gets lost right there.
Well, sometimes we don't discuss the actual crime that takes place that officers respond to, or the event of a crime taking place. Because I have to tell you what, if there was an outbreak and 5 or 6 people got into a fight, and I had to get in them to pull it out, knowing that someone in the crowd was videoing me, and I had to get in there and break it up and pull it out, and something did not go the right way. Do you think, and we'll ramp up with this today, Sheriff, and I want to thank you so much, and everybody over at the Sheriff's Office. And I asked everybody Friday morning on the show, I opened up by telling everybody to start. I said the very first thing you do is just start texting your sheriff, deputies, police chief, police officers, and just say thank you. Do you think that what's going on, and with this new technology and some of the things that officers and deputies are up against in this country right now, that it's going to hurt? Because you take, for example, we're in a rural area, but I'm seeing that it's almost double-digit decline in police officers in the city of Baltimore. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just something. Do you see that being a problem in the future, that people say, I don't think I want that job?
Absolutely. That's absolutely what I'm afraid is going to happen, is the folks that you truly want out there patrolling the streets, the folks that would do the job right and have done the job right for years, are going to say, this ain't worth it no more. And then what you're going to be left with is vacancies, or folks that you have to settle for that you might not want out there. That's what I'm afraid is going to happen. I have heard even a couple of my deputies discussing that very issue. And it ain't got a thing to do with money, or it doesn't have a thing to do with benefits, or it doesn't have a thing to do with their work schedule. Simply that very issue since last.
A bad day ruins your career.
Yes, that's right.
And you could be 20-year, whatever, and have a great record in your career, and just one day, all of a sudden, your career is over because of an incident. And let me say, you know, I think all too many times when we talk about that is, you, like I said, you look at the Baltimore down 10% in new people going into law enforcement, and I've heard a lot of people in law enforcement say they're frustrated with the system to begin with because they arrest somebody, and you know, and they look 3 days later and they're back out on the street, and it's just that cycle of you know, in, out, try to get a conviction, and there's a little bit of frustration in law enforcement to begin with, and then you add this and what's taking place. It's just like I just had it. The officers in Dallas, they ran towards trying to protect people.
That's what we do. That's what they did. But I can tell you, that's what we do as a whole. That's what you do as a whole.
Do you get concerned sometimes that people will come up to North Georgia? I have to tell you, this is I want to say this is a bad thing. Somebody died in this, but it's got a little tinge of humor. Well, I mean, you remember, sadly enough, the gentleman down at Kusawati that murdered his wife several years ago, and he initially blamed it on 2 black males. Remember that? He said 2 black males broke in the house or whatever. And at that time, you remember, for about 4 weeks, I think most of you know out there, for about 4 years, L.T. Milton was our sports director here. And L.T. said he was nervous driving up 515 because he was thinking to himself, he said, because he heard it on the radio, and he said, if they pulled me over, all they would ask is, where's the other guy? So he said, where's the other guy? But Sheriff, we've seen some of the community outreach with law enforcement. We've seen coffee at Dunkin' Donuts with the law officers. What are some of the things that you guys do to try to stay connected to the community?
I'm glad you brought that. I'm glad you brought that up. That's another thing that we really strive to do here at the Sheriff's Office in Gilmer. I know that some of the surrounding counties do the same thing. We strive hard to be involved with the community, not just our little friends, with the community as a whole. And that's maybe, you know, I don't know. I'm not casting stones because I don't know. I've never worked in an urban environment. I've always worked right here in the country. And so I don't know what these other agencies do, but I can tell you this. Getting into the community, becoming a part of the community, and working in and around the community makes for a lot more trusting environment. And that's what we strive to do here. Yet we have we'll do just about anything folks ask us to do, up to taking the risk of having to kiss a pig.
I've seen Clint Waltrip. Can I say something? One of the, and that name escapes me, one of the slain officers in Dallas, a bigger fella, a little bald on the top, and they said he was called a big guy with even a bigger heart.
That's right.
And the first thing I thought about is Clint Waltrip, because there's not a bigger heart.
No.
You're just not. I mean, foster kids, and he'll pucker up and kiss that pig.
That's right.
If he's raising money for kids, for foster kids, he'll do whatever. And that is something I want to say is you guys do stay connected. I've got about 6 minutes left before we leave, so I don't have time to go to a break. I got to kill some time. You got any political views you want to share? You want to stay away from that? You got any political views? Would you arrest Hillary?
I
should get in trouble. I'm sorry, folks. Clip that out, Lonnie.
I just hope that whoever becomes our president, you know, it looks like we're down to 2 choices. I hope that whoever becomes our president won't do things to fuel that fire in incidents like this. And I want to say this real quick about the Dallas. We talked about a general topic, but and you mentioned the guys from Dallas PD and I believe it was the Transit Authority. The news footage and clippings of them running to the gunfire that everybody was running away from, and that's the same thing also in 9/11 when you saw everybody running out of the Twin Towers and you had fire, EMS, and law enforcement running up to try to rescue folks. That's what law enforcement is about. That's why I'm extremely proud to be the sheriff of this county and to be the leader of a group of people, men and women, that I know without beyond a shadow of a doubt that if a similar type day as they had in Dallas comes, and I hope that it never does, but I guarantee you the folks that I have working for me would be doing the same thing, and it's that way all over. We're not just special here. We're part of a special profession. I'll just say that.
Well, I think it goes. I think all of the community would like to say thank you, and I really think we want to say thank you to all of the North Georgia, but all of the law enforcement across the country. I've heard so many accounts all weekend long on so many of the national news networks that there is that 1% and 2%, if you want to say 98%, 99%, but it's no different than any other profession. You have 100 doctors, you might have a bad doctor, you have and so on and so forth. But I think for the most part, I would agree that America supports our law enforcement, and we thank our law enforcement, and it is the fuel on the fire from certain media groups that actually enjoy this. I mean, I get upset because I get confused, because when it becomes these inner cities, I get confused, Sheriff, because I don't want anybody to end up on the end of it dead. And I don't think law enforcement should ever go out there and knowingly, on the other end, want somebody dead. I don't think they do that.
No.
I think things occur during the contact of whoever they're coming in contact with that leads to that. But I just don't think, and I hope there's something we can do to relieve the tension that is between everybody in the inner cities.
I saw the best interview, and I'm as guilty of sitting there watching the news as and watching all this stuff as anyone. But I saw the best interview this morning. It was a black lady from Atlanta who was a demonstrator, I believe, yesterday, and they interviewed her this morning. I believe they aired it this morning, but I believe the interview was this morning. And she made the most sense of anybody I've heard speak on the news just about all weekend. And basically, we got to de-escalate this. Everybody's got to do better. Everybody's got some responsibility, and we've got to de-escalate this in this country and work together.
Well, Sheriff, I don't want to say I always should try to end without getting in trouble, but I just can't seem to do that. Okay, so I've always felt that there's two lanes, so why can't I use both of them? But your deputies don't seem to think I should be allowed to use both of them.
Right?
They've told me that I can't use both of them. Don't understand. It's like, Mom, well, you said there's 2 lanes for no reason. So I was using 2 lanes at one time, and one of your captains actually pulled me over, and they went as far, and I don't want to say as far, to check if I was on medication. Now I know everybody's out there enjoying that, thinking you should be on medication. I know that's fun, but I want to tell you the couple times that I've encountered a police officer or a deputy, very polite people, good people, absolutely good people. And I want to commend you on each and every one of the deputies and everybody in your office over there, because I really feel that when they pull somebody over or they encounter somebody, and there's so many things in the community that people don't get to see that they do. So we thank you very much over there. And yes, folks, I know you're thinking, yeah, wow, I'm glad the officer, now I have faith, because you should be on medication. That's number one. I just think if you got 2 lanes, there's no reason you can't use both. But you don't see it that way, do you?
Not normally, no. I just wish everyone would use their blinkers. And
Blinker?
The world would be a better place if
now I got to
everyone
use
used their blinkers.
blinker and stay in my lane?
Mm-hmm.
And you would suggest that to me?
Yep.
Sheriff, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey, that's it. I'm your host, BKP. Good morning from the office. Now stay tuned for the new Scott Farrell show coming up right after this. Farrell show. What did I say? Farrell. He's got 2 R's. Scott Farrell show. I get in trouble every day. I'm your host, BKP. I'll be back tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. But stay tuned for Scott Farrell here in about 4 minutes.